It is Monday, March the 18th, 2024. I am James. You are you. We are here. Once again, March 18th, 2024. This is a big night, not only because it is week 3 of our nerd subset March Madness all-month-long tournament, but 2 days ago was March 16th. And on March 16th, 2020, this show began. For all intents and purposes, tonight is also the 4-year anniversary of the At Home show. So if you're out there, and if you're one of the very few people that are still tuning in from back in the day, please stand up, pat yourself on the back, give yourself a round of applause, curtsy, take a bow, take a big sigh and a breath of relief, and know that you and I and each and every person that has ever graced this show, well, hey, we did it together. And when we say we, of course, I mean me, I mean you, but there's also someone else who's been a part of it. And that's why right here, right now, I'd like to welcome the co-host, co-pilot, but in my heart, and I think yours, the side piece of the show. Let's get Dave Kaufman on the air. Dave, happy anniversary. Happy anniversary.
Hey, happy anniversary to you too.
Prior to coming on the air, I said, Dave, I need a 2-shot of you and me. I got to talk to you about something.
Okay.
And I felt that maybe you were a little nervous, or you thought I was going to roast you. I was going to tease you. And this is what it's about. I want to take some time off the top to talk about 4 years of the show.
Okay. You're not going to roast me?
Nope.
You're not going to tease me?
Well, not right now, but at some point tonight, probably.
Okay. Well, not now, though.
Yeah, not now.
Okay. All right. What do you want to talk about?
Well, let's look back to that first episode. COVID was knee-high to a grasshopper. We were about 3 days in.
Yeah.
I said, I'm doing this internet show. You came on and you did stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
And all of your jokes were about Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And then the next night, for people who don't know, we used to go 5 nights a week straight.
Yeah.
You did the same set.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, if you're, I'm not a stand-up comic, but I hear that you got to rehearse and practice.
You got to refine the set.
Yeah, and I had no other stages to do, so I had to refine it on the show.
Now, you chuckled a little bit when I said back then we used to do 5 nights a week.
Yeah.
It sounds crazy now.
Well, this was before I had 2 children.
Yeah, but you had one on the way.
One on the way, sure, but on the way doesn't even count.
But what's interesting is you had your first child a couple months later.
Yeah.
You only took a few weeks off, and then you were right back to it.
Yeah, because when you have a kid, you're actually not doing that much. You're sort of just sitting around hoping not to kill the kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suspect in the early days, the father is certainly not as useful as the mother.
No, I mean, me particularly maybe, but definitely that's true.
Well, what's interesting, and I think you really set a tone as a father, as your wife was going into labor, you were barbecuing chicken wings.
Yeah.
And you finished barbecuing them and ate them.
Yeah, and I offered to my wife when she was in labor, but she didn't want them. I was a little bit insulted.
Sounds crazy to me.
Yeah, I know.
Dave,
you put an effort to make something.
I don't want to turn this into too much of a big deal, but how do you think the show has either evolved or devolved over the past 4 years? Because I think you can maybe make a claim for both. Right now, we're down to 1 episode a week, which maybe is for the best.
No, I mean, I like the show. I feel like...
I like it too.
Okay, good. Well, we've got 2 fans.
Yeah.
That's us.
Yep.
I don't know. I think it's definitely changed. I feel like we've done a lot of experimental stuff, which I enjoy.
Yeah.
I think we
it has certainly changed.
We haven't been bogged down by hunting for audience, by selling out to the man.
Yeah, in order to hunt for an audience, you need to, go out there, promote.
Yeah. But I think that would, it would harm the artistic integrity of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if we're doing that, it means we're changing things, we're selling out. So we've got a dedicated dozen if we're lucky.
We do what we want to do and not necessarily what the man wants to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I will say happy anniversary, Dave. Thank
Happy
you.
anniversary to you too. You know, James, this was nice. I came in a little bit nervous.
Yeah.
I thought
And
you
I
were
understand why. You have reason.
I thought you were gonna make fun of me, the way I look, my you know, basement, the fact that I'm married, all these things that you like to make fun of me about. But you were very cordial and respectful.
Well, I appreciate that you can appreciate it.
Well, yeah.
Are you ready to get tonight off and running?
Yeah, yeah. I do want to say though, James, you've been riding the line about this nerd stuff, and I
Okay.
want to make sure.
Okay, yeah. What do you mean riding the line?
I mean that like sometimes it comes across as a little bit rude, sometimes it's a little bit mean, sometimes a little bit crass.
Yeah.
There we have viewers of all kinds, and
Do we?
well, we should eventually.
Yeah. Give it another 4 years.
Maybe 5, 6
4
years.
more years.
Yeah, 4 more years. So I want to make sure that everyone feels respected.
Not me.
Okay.
Not me. Okay, it's week 3. It's March Madness nerd subset. We have got an incredible panel. Why wait? Let's get them on the screen right here, right now. Let's begin. Also an homage to the past
Let's
4
begin.
years. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that, Dave. It felt very necessary.
The crash. Isn't there a Crash Test Dummy song that starts with that?
Yeah, Peter Pumpkinhead. Yeah, the
Yeah.
singer goes, "Let's begin."
Yeah, yeah. Well, you were singing a song. I figured I would sing a song.
Okay, well, you didn't sing it. You just kind of said it.
Well, he
Anyways,
kind of sings.
We were just talking about the first 4 years. You can't talk about the first 4 years without Syd Roc. Syd, happy anniversary to you. It feels apropos to not only have you here tonight, not only for the topic, but a 4-year anniversary.
Yeah, it's funny too because I recently noticed the timing this weekend that it was like COVID lockdown anniversary weekend, and I didn't make the connection that your show was born like right after that. So yeah, happy lockdown anniversary.
Thank you very much.
At
my
home
friend.
with James anniversary.
Yep.
And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here as always.
The pleasure's mine. Marlaena Moore, you, much like Kathy Fagan in week 1, demanded to be here for week 2. You were here last week for week 2. You demanded to be here. You sent me a message, a direct message, and you're here tonight. And you're dressed the part of a subset that was swiftly eliminated last week. Ren Fair enthusiasts. Welcome back to the program.
Pleasure to be back again. Yes. Well, I didn't quite demand to be here. What I actually said was, I'm tempted to pull a Kathy and demand to be on the next show, but I didn't.
Okay, you were tempted to demand. I guess I took it as a demand in the nicest of ways.
Yeah, it was a clever, manipulative demand.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was both clever and manipulative. And may I say, your outfit is extremely dorky.
May I say something?
Oh, what do you mean? But I've got bloomers.
Oh my god.
Can I say something to Marlena?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Good evening, milady.
Good evening, sir.
Now, Dave, I thought when you were enjoying Ren Fair ladies, you only enjoyed the ones with low cut tops, as we've talked about in previous weeks.
Well, that's a stereotype.
Of you?
Yeah.
Wow, classic Dave stereotype.
Yeah.
As discussed last week, you love ladies in corsets on display.
I'm not saying I love it. I'm just saying that Ren fairs are known for it, and you can't. That's not a knock
Didn't sweat,
against
Dave.
rare Ren fairs.
All right. Sarah Ellis, you're here tonight. You mentioned earlier on when we were talking today that you feel like you could even affiliate to some of the subsets.
Yeah.
How do you feel coming into tonight?
I mean, it's because we're trying to figure out which is the nerdiest.
Yeah.
But is that in a derogatory way?
It is if you're me.
Okay. Well,
I
'cause
was also wondering, so
I
thanks for
have
asking.
beef with James about this.
Okay, well, I want to go around the horn. I was mentioning to Sarah. Yeah, go for it.
James mentioned that the type of nerdy that he's looking for is the kind that would make you want to kill them.
I don't believe I used those words. I believe it was that you hoped they would die.
Sure.
I'm getting stereotyped. Now, I mentioned this to Sarah. The previous weeks, Kathy and myself have been representing the bully side of things. Syd, where do you think you land on tonight as it pertains to sort of judging, eliminating, having some subsets advance? Do you think you're for or against?
Oh, I'm for sure. I'm on the nerd side. I mean,
Beta.
look at me. Yeah. I mean, I mean, jokes aside, that's definitely the perspective I'll be taking. But
Okay.
I will be,
But you're a spicy individual.
who's more likely to be bullied is the question that I'll be guiding myself with.
Dave. Dave's the
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
Dave's the answer. Yeah.
There we go.
So what I want to do now, Dave, let's pull up the bracketology. Let's see where we are at coming out of both weeks 1 and 2. If you're only listening to tonight's episode, I implore you, fire up your Twitch tab so you can see what's on tap for tonight. Again, the quarterfinals begin. Our matchups include LARPers versus science fiction enthusiasts. We've got fantasy enthusiasts taking on bronies, which are grown-ups who enjoy My Little Pony. We've also got pro wrestling fans versus Disney adults. And last, but most certainly not least, weebs, which are people that are obsessed with Japanese culture and media, taking on cosplay people, shortened for costume play. So that's what we're looking at in terms of tonight's brackets. Dave, immediate reaction.
I'm a bit worried that some of these categories are a little too close.
Yeah, well, that's been a constant theme. And as I've been mentioning over the previous weeks, I've had a variety of people both affirm and disagree with, but no one provided me with any alternatives, much to my chagrin. Sarah, immediate reaction.
I mean, I think it's a really unfair matchup for anyone to be up against bronies, which I think
love
is the immediate. That's just they're the cringiest, just by definition.
Now,
So
is
you get it.
cringy what we're voting on, James?
See, this is where my beef is. I'm getting beefed over here.
Now, hold on. There's no beef of the night. Dimitri is not on the board. Beef of the night only exists when Dimitri is teching.
I understand, but I got something. I've got
So this is
to pick with you.
This is what I'm going to say. Everyone's got their own criteria. My personal criteria is when you see the obsessives of these subcategories, they make you cringe or they make you go, oh, God.
But here's my
That's my criteria. Marlaena, let's hear your criteria, and it's valid.
So, for me, I think the issue, like I said last week, no matter what, the bottom line of any subset is going to be awful. That's just the bottom line, bottom of the barrel. Gross. But I guess the thing, to me, what makes something nerdier than something else is literally, like, I don't want people to know you. It's like an internal cringe. It's like you can't relate to the person because, and I still believe that Ren Fair should have won against wrestling nerds. I was pretty shocked about that.
Well, there's been a few upsets.
Yeah.
Wait, that Ren Fair is nerdier than pro wrestling?
No, apparently it's not. Apparently it's cool as hell.
That is kind of wild, to be honest.
So to confirm, all of that was so Marlaena could put the sunglasses on and put a dart. Syd, immediate reaction. What do you feel is going to define your criteria of what makes one thing nerdier than the other?
I think we're all pointing in the same general direction because I really liked your metric of when you see the extremists like, oh God, but that's who the bullies bully, So I think we all have an idea of what is expected in society, and which nerds are more likely to have trouble fitting into that thing is definitely it. Which is why pro wrestling had no business moving forward. Wow.
And it's funny, as someone who's involved in the world, and I have been for going on 21 years, I voted pro wrestling fans over Ren Fair because talking about the people that I'm exposed to made me go, ugh, yuck. But here's the thing. I think in most cases, it could be either or. Let's begin with tonight's first matchup. Dave,
Let's begin.
Yeah, let's begin.
The first matchup is
LARPers versus sci-fi fans. So, as a quick reminder, in week 1, LARPers defeated cinephiles and sci-fi fans defeated comic book nerds. Let's begin. How do we feel about LARPers, live action role players? I want to start with the folks who are here for the first time as part of the tournament. Syd, let's start with you. Live action role players.
This one isn't even close, and I say this as someone who's engaged in both. But there's a reason why there's one that I engaged in far more recently than the other. And also, you can be a sci-fi nerd and not show it. You can't really be a LARP. If you're a LARPer, everyone knows it.
Now, what
you're
makes
LARPing.
What makes someone a clear LARPer, would you say?
Elvish ears. And those padded swords.
Toys.
You know, like, here's the thing. Ren Fair and LARPers have heavy crossover because that's the historical period where most of this LARPing shit tends to happen, you know, in D&D and that kind of shit.
Yeah.
I also play D&D. My rogue is level 7. I leveled up a level 7 rogue this weekend.
Well, role-playing games was defeated last week.
Yeah, role-playing games was defeated by costume players.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense too, actually.
All right.
But yeah, I forget where I was going, but LARPers is nerdier. It's not even close. That's my call.
Sarah, let's go to you. How do you feel about LARPers?
Yeah, I would agree that they're nerdier than sci-fi nerds just because of the level of engagement that you have to even go at. Like, you have to leave your house, put on a costume, choose to meet up in a field with other people to pretend to fight. Like, there's a level of engagement that requires more, like, I guess, passion, which is like kind of the crux of being a nerd or being into something.
Well,
And
on week 1, I brought up how I saw grown men LARPing with children, getting frustrated at the children on Mount Royal. And Mark, who was our nerd delegate that night, claimed that what those people do on the mountain is not LARPing.
Mark was gatekeeping LARPing.
Mark was the quintessential gatekeeper nerd. Dave, I want to go to you, LARPers, now that it's up against sci-fi enthusiasts.
Well, I'm curious. I like the. I'm gonna get behind the sort of fake action, like this fake fighting. Like, I feel like that can be fun. Like, it's almost like doing paintball in a way. Like, you're simulating combat. You're going.
There is exercise.
There's a bit of exercise. That part I feel like I can get behind. It'd be fun. Once you kind of veer towards like acting out, like sort of like situational LARPing, I guess, like then I'm sort of not that into it. I feel like the more it goes towards the Ren Fair side of things, the nerdier it gets. Whereas just like the combat, you can
also LARP things outside of Renaissance time. That's the thing. It's not just, and again, I concede, there is crossover with some of these. If I can afford you a moment, I used to work at a very nerdy job, which was video game testing, which is about the lowest of the low when it comes to quality assurance. I was talking to a guy who is I guess like a huge LARPing enthusiast, and he was doing something, let's just say in the Renaissance time period. And I said, oh, like if I joined, could I play the Terminator? And he said, well, no, because it doesn't work contextually. And I was like, well, the Terminator can travel through time. And he looked at me like I warped his world. His nerd short-circuiting broke because I gave him an argument, which I guess in his brain was so complex that he couldn't outright say no. Very nerdy.
I think that you had a logic to your reasoning that he wanted to accept, but he couldn't because he
Nerds
was so...
love logic.
Yeah, nerds love logic.
Yeah.
Now, if I were him, I would have said it depends what the rules of physics are within the
Nerds
particular...
love rules.
Yeah,
They
within
love
the particular
rules.
LARPing scenario I was doing. Because maybe
Yeah.
Terminator physics wouldn't actually work with time traveling. Anyway, sci-fi, I feel like...
Well, hold on. We have not heard from Marlaena on the LARPing.
Okay, we'll go...
Dave, yeah, let's go to Marlaena. LARPing.
As much as this is hard to believe, I would never do LARPing.
Why is that?
Because it's too nerdy, and it's exactly like you're saying.
Marlaena, you would be a goddess amongst all of these LARPing guys. Like, oh, my queen, you tower over me. Allow me to unsheath my sword and present it to you as an act of love.
Keep going.
Yeah. And then some other nerd. Unhand her, unchivalrous one. You'd have all these tiny men. Like, let us clean your feet.
Yeah, that's good.
Sounds pretty sweet, right, Marlaena?
Yeah, that's okay. I get to just walk down the street as human woman anyway, so I already have trolls being nasty.
Hell yeah. Okay.
Trolls be
so
nasty.
LARPing too nerdy. Let's go to sci-fi, Marlaena. Let's start with you. Science fiction fans, which, look, they can make you go yuck.
Yeah, but I think also it's become it's become so popular. Like, so many like cool people I know love sci-fi, and I feel like there's so many like varying degrees to which you can get into it.
But we're talking about the lowest of the low.
Yeah, but I just like...
We're talking about someone who would be tiny worshiping your feet, but then in a split second get into a trash can and play the robot from Star Wars.
I don't know. I guess because I live with a sci-fi fan. You know, it just doesn't it doesn't like read to me as like nerdy as it can get because it's just so vast. And this is the thing I keep having as my criteria is that, you know, it's exactly what we're saying. LARPing, cosplay, all of these like bronies, all these very specific things where it takes a lot of like effort to demonstrate your dedication to this like specific thing that you're into. I think with science fiction, again, my criteria is still if you are able to have a light interest in it, it's like not as nerdy.
But we're not talking about the light interest people. We're talking about the sickos.
But again, James, I feel like like I understand what you're saying, and that is your criteria. I get it. And again, this is what one of the thing I wanted to kind of get at you a little bit was that you were, in a way, it's kind of like I feel like you're not talking about like what thing is the nerdiest. You're talking about which nerd some said is most disgusting.
No, we're not. Which one is the worst?
He's riding the line.
It's the worst.
Dave,
Okay.
let's go to you. Sci-fi.
So I tend to agree with Marlaena on this. I think that maybe in the 80s, I feel like we spoke about Trekkies when Mark was on the show, and I feel like that's the quintessential.
And that was enough where Mark flipped his vote because he talked about going to a Klingon conference where they talked about Klingon language, love-making language. Think about that. Just think about that.
I mean...
But you can do probably like sci-fi LARPing. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
And so
Talk to that guy that I worked with.
Now, if you put on a Klingon outfit and you started doing Klingon mating rituals, would that be sci-fi LARPing?
Is it at a conference? Is it at the Palais de Congrès?
Doesn't matter. Yeah, sure.
I want to keep. Let's keep looping the other way around. Sarah, let's go to you. Sci-fi things.
Well, because I love sci-fi, but I also know, and a lot of the people I know who like it are totally chill, cool people who have a healthy amount of interest. But to be fair, you have like a toxic fan base sometimes for things
Thank you.
like Star Wars that's been coming up a lot lately.
Battlestar Galactica, like we can get to the dregs of things,
Great
right?
show.
Yeah, okay, Dave. Yeah.
Fantastic show.
It's a fantastic show, but there are people, purists or whatever, who might who will take offense with things that who will take offense to things that like the actors or performers in their favorite franchise are doing, and like take it a little too far. And I think that's more toxic than probably what LARPers get into.
Now, I love that so much. Syd, I want to go to you. I think you are quintessential tonight because you, much like me, are someone that navigates through the world of Twitter, currently known as X, where a lot of the worst dwell in a variety of fan bases. I want to go to you as it pertains to sci-fi.
Okay. Wow.
Because you were nodding along with Sarah. So I was like, okay,
Yes.
we've caught fire here.
There's one thing that I want to mention before. I tried or started learning Klingon when I was in high school. I can't remember any words except
Damn, that was going to be my
means
follow-up.
no.
Can you give us a little?
It's like me in
I
Hebrew.
only Kapla is their live long and prosper, so that's easy. People who don't know Klingon know that one, and Obet is no. I forget how to say yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, as far as sci-fi, wait, can you remind me what Sarah's point was? Can you repeat?
Sarah, go for it.
Well, it was just that, like, compared to the lowest of the low of a LARPer, sci-fi fans can get pretty toxic. Like when you get into like specific fandoms, people
Yes.
purists and being like bullying online and
Yes.
Sounds like Mark.
I was such a purist for comics specifically. Yeah, you reminded me of the broader point also, which is the broadness of sci-fi, which includes the world of LARPing. Like LARPing is a subcategory of sci-fi, really, when you think about it. Yeah, it's so broad that you get the worst of the worst from everywhere, basically. It's like a bigger toxic net that you're casting out there. So you'll get a lot because there are more, period.
They might get less exercise than the LARPers too.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, you say it's a subcategory of sci-fi, but in my mind, the way I picture it is it's sort of like the diagram where like cosplay and fantasy meet each other. I wasn't really.
And by cosplay, you mean costume play.
Thanks, James. But yeah, there definitely is a Venn diagram of all that shit because there's a heavy intersect. But yeah, it's fascinating.
Okay. This sounds like it's going to be harder than maybe I anticipated. Right now, I'm not sure what I want to go with. Syd, I want to start with you because you said this is an easy one. Before we get into it, in the chat, the real Andrew Mackay wrote about you early on. Syd, quote, top argument of the tournament from Syd. He also writes, quote, LARPers are going to bring it all the way home for their Ren Fair fam. So there you go. Syd, are you sticking with LARPers over sci-fi?
Oh yeah, I'm absolutely sticking with LARPers. Yeah, I won't elaborate, but I won't elaborate now, but maybe later. But yes, LARPers.
Okay. All right, Sarah, let's go to you. LARPers or sci-fi?
It's hard because it feels like I'm judging them on separate criteria. But I think my instinct is still LARPers.
Okay. Dave, let's go to you. LARPers or science-fi?
I'm going to go with LARPers as well. And Sarah, some
Okay.
of what you were feeling probably has to do with the issue with the categories.
Well, Dave, there's a wide open net for you to throw some fish in there. You waited all day and you sent me no revisions. And I will say that once again, Mark Rowland, expert nerd, said it was a comprehensive list, then later on claimed it wasn't. So I was getting mixed signaling from everyone. Marlaena, let's finally go to you. I think this one is academic at this point.
What shall it be? I wonder. It's gonna be a LARPing there, bud.
All right. I suppose I'll also go with LARPers because they go out and play make believe in the wild, and they might worship Marlena from. All right, so LARPers now moves on to next week, the semifinals. I loved it, and even I will say I appreciate that, Sarah, you went with LARPers, but you still advocated for science fiction, and I think we have it. It shouldn't be about one or the other. We're making fun of all of them. Let's move on. The next one, I think, look, it might be trickier than we think it is. We're going with fantasy fans versus bronies. Dave, let's start with you this time around. Fantasy. I'm sure we'll talk about how there's crossover.
I wasn't actually going to talk about that, James. I was going to say.
I'm sure we.
Okay, good, because I didn't want to have to talk about it if it wasn't going to come up naturally.
Fantasy.
I like some fantasy. I like the George R. R. Martin books. I don't think you have. I think it's the same as sci-fi, wherein if you probably go to its deepest crevices, there are some real gatekeeping
I love that you
jerks.
said crevices. That's the word, right? Yeah. If you dig into the butt crack of the of the fan base,
yeah, exactly. There's probably some jerks. There's probably some unsavory content. Some fan fiction written about different fantasy scenarios.
Yeah.
But in general, it's been popularized. People on average aren't too terrible if they like it. I would talk to average Joes about the next ep of Game of Thrones back when it was out, and I think you don't have to be
about the average Joes.
I know, but you still have to.
We're talking about the guy that would call you a simp for saying you loved the last season of Game of Thrones.
Well, no one loves the last season of Game of Thrones, James.
I haven't seen
it.
Haven't seen it.
Well, so you couldn't like it.
Well, it sounds like you're the guy who would call someone the simp.
I wouldn't insult anybody. I would say my own preference. I wouldn't shame someone for their preference.
All right, Marlena, let's go to you. Fantasy.
I kind of like fantasy stuff.
I wasn't able to tell.
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting because I kind of prefer the aesthetic of fantasy more than sci-fi. I feel like sci-fi gets very, like people try to make it way cooler than it is. And there's something I like about like fantasy where it is just like, we're all just in robes prancing around with like magic or whatever.
Magic's cool.
But yeah, magic is cool. Fun little creatures. I feel like there's yeah, I don't know. There's just something about it that I enjoy. I'm not like but again, I'm not really like a diehard like fantasy fan at all.
Okay.
Admirer from afar. Again, I feel like I rarely interact with people who now would go really hard for fantasy specifically. Because again, I know this isn't the argument, but it's like because it has become so non.
Yeah, this is troubling. You're more advocating for how cool it is.
I'm just making conversation.
All right, Sarah, let's go to you. Fantasy.
Yeah, I think fantasy nerds are a little more wholesome than sci-fi nerds.
Can I just say I really am enjoying your reckless use of the word nerds tonight? Yeah.
It's not derogatory.
Isn't it?
Sometimes.
Let's continue.
But it's like there's a whimsy to it that there's something wholesome about it. And fantasy, there's often like a journey and like a lesson to be learned, and like there's something more wholesome about it. I don't.
It's often a fight between good and evil.
Yeah, and I think those lessons sink in, especially if you've been a fan since like childhood, and it's like you absorb those lessons, and there's something sweet about it. So I don't know a lot of fantasy nerds in my life that are like super adamant about like that's not how the magic system works. Fuck you! Like people aren't. Don't get that heated.
Okay, so you're saying it sounds like not as toxic as the science fi.
Yeah. Like right. I think it can get pretty nerdy, but in like a cute way.
All right, Syd, let's go to you. Fantasy.
Medieval fantasy is great. I honestly forgot about the fantasy category when I was talking about LARPers earlier.
Mhm.
But yeah, talking about overlap. But actually, regardless, back to
Mhm.
fantasy. Um, I like I agree with Marlena. I really like the aesthetic. I I wouldn't. I have difficulty picking whether I prefer the aesthetic of sci-fi or fantasy. Like I really, really love both, but I like the aesthetic of
This episode is really nerdy.
I like James is slowly getting sad
Yeah.
that we're all enjoying the category.
Yeah,
And
this
he's
is a
just sitting there
takeover.
what? Oh, you
his face, visibly
you were
depressed
expecting us
face.
to laugh at this
That's
shit?
Yeah, we're like super into it.
Yeah, this is the first bracket in 3 weeks where people are like, yeah, I don't know, I like it. It's nice. The aesthetic is gorgeous. It teaches you ethics. It's so good.
It's nice. See, James?
Well, right now I need a Kathy Fagan in here in my life.
You know what? We gotta do a fantasy episode where we do a watch along on some fantasy content.
Never.
Amazing.
Dave, let's round out fantasy with you.
I already said, but fantasy's cool.
All right, bronies. Let's move on to bronies. We're gonna snake draft this. Let's start with you this time, Dave. Bronies.
Whew. You know, I feel like there's got to be something there that I don't understand because it seems like no one should be doing that.
Yeah. But here's
So I
the
feel like
thing.
there's gotta be
I
something to
feel
it that I
that
don't
way
get.
about the grown-ups in all of these categories.
So yeah, but I think that like as a grown up, who
I
appreciate-
love Gollum. Gollum's so cool.
Well, nobody loves Gollum, James. They're all
Oh yeah, no one does.
yeah,
No one.
they all know that he faces.
What's
a
the one in
challenge.
Harry Potter?
What's winning the one?
Isn't there like a Gollum in Harry Potter, like
Voldemort.
Dobby.
Gordy or something like that?
His name's Dobby.
There's
Oh,
Nerd.
Dobby.
There you go. Yeah, like, oh, you're telling me like there hasn't been an argument between which of the two Gollums is better.
No,
but
this
Dobby's
is you
not
don't
a
know what you're
surrogate for
talking about.
greed.
Yeah, good. I'm glad I don't know what I'm talking about. To me, they're all the same. Grown-ups who like a little boy magician.
Don't say it like that.
What is he?
He's a
Syd,
wizard.
come on,
All right.
you're with me, right?
He's a wizard. Harry.
I've never read a single Harry Potter book nor movie, and
Well, you don't read movies, Sid.
Oh, no, thanks, nerd.
Okay, yeah, Dave, let's go back to bronies.
Yeah, so I feel like
I'm
on-
physically getting hot.
on its surface, yeah, I would say Brony looks pretty bad on its surface.
it's-
On its surface,
It's not a good look.
not
Sid,
a
let's
good
go
look.
to you. Bronies.
I
Those who
agree.
Love My
Like
Little Pony.
this is one of these things that I don't understand. I can't see how an adult would like My Little Pony, except ironically. Like I say this as someone you remember the when Netflix relaunched She-Ra, I had heard enough good things about it that I watched it, and it was like, yeah, it's fine, but it's clearly a show for teenage girls. I wouldn't
Sure.
like
But
buy
and perhaps
She-Ra merch
perhaps it
or shit like
stimulated
that.
a nostalgic memory of a bygone time with She-Ra and He-Man and stuff. But My Little Ponies for little girls.
Well, that's the thing. And bronies are bronies are old enough to have grown up when the gender roles were like solidified and shit. So what's up? And that's why it's so weird. If I was a brony, I would never admit it, which means you can't really believe me when I say that I'm not. I'm really not, but that's what I would say if I was. But yeah, I would never admit that in public. Just like if I played Minecraft on public servers, I wouldn't admit that in public either. You know, that kind of shit. Wink, wink. or if I owned a Snapchat account, wink, wink,
What are you
I would
saying,
never
man?
do that in public. You know what I mean?
Sarah, let's go to you, bronies.
I think anything that like there's a sexual component to bronies,
I
right?
don't know. I think that Syd has a point in that there is, whether it's true or it's under the guise of irony.
I
So
don't.
we looked into this last week about the sexual component, and apparently, I read at least a headline of an article that said there didn't need to be a sexual component of
There
it.
didn't
Yeah.
need to be, but there is.
Well, there's bronies and there's furries. Furries is sexual.
Yeah.
So I would see that there would be an overlap. Yes.
Yeah.
between-
I'd argue that furries are cooler than bronies because at least they're having sex,
Yeah, fair enough.
right?
I'm Googling, are bronies perverts?
I also Googled, and it's on Reddit. Help me understand, why do bronies exist?
Yeah. Because if you want to dress up as a horse, you can do that without appropriating a children's cartoon.
Yes.
But they're
bronies
into the
don't
cartoon.
dress up as horses.
They dress
They
up
just
as little
like My
ponies.
Little
Here's
Pony.
someone advocating for. Well, while there's plenty of reasons to like the show, I'd ask you a question. Why do we have to justify the fandoms that exist? There's a lot of people who, for their own reasons, like something. Damn, that guy's a brony.
But can they confirm that those reasons aren't sexual?
Well, it looks like Dave's doing some research. In the meantime, Marlaena, let's go to you. Bronies.
Well, I lightly touched on this. I have a hard time believing that bronies actually exist. Like, I feel like there's part of me that's like, didn't that whole thing...
There was a convention 5 years ago, and from what I understand, it ceased operations due to COVID.
Okay, is it coming back anytime soon?
I believe, and I can't remember, but I believe I read that there is an intent to relaunch next year. Dave, could you do some quick research about Brony Convention?
I'll do
So,
research on both.
I think that there must be something about the show that certain men really connect with that they're not getting from their everyday lives. And I feel like it must be that, like, when you are able to connect with other men who have this same connection that you do to this show about horses for little girls, then it
I
does
even think
create
that
a
saying
strong community.
horses is strong. I think you say ponies or horsies.
Sorry,
So is
I'm familiar with the
it
lingo.
nerdy or is it sad?
Ooh, great.
Now,
argument.
where do these things, overlap?
Here's the deal. They're all sad to me. Except LARPers get exercise. This is an incredible point. Sarah, that to me is a game changer. On the surface, if someone were to say, pick one right now, we're all picking bronies. But is it nerdy or is it sad? Mamma mia. Dave, any updates on your research?
I'm reading about, so there was a scientist who infiltrated the brony culture to study them. And of course, when she did that, she took on a brony pseudonym, and I think she was called, let me see here. I'll find what her scientist, her pony avatar named Dr. Psychology, a white unicorn in spectacles and a lab coat.
Psychology?
Yeah, but her name was Psychology.
Understood. Got it.
But yeah, it's short for psychology.
Yeah.
But of course, you wouldn't call her that. You would call her Psychology.
Yeah.
And she was a white unicorn in spectacles and a lab coat with a psychiatry symbol tattooed on the flank. Anyway, she seems to think that after studying bronies, that they're misunderstood and that they're not that bad and that it's not sexual, but it's a way for them to deal with the anxiety of day-to-day life.
All right, let's vote. Marlaena, before we do it, you had your hand raised.
I was wondering about the whole thing you were saying, where I feel like part of it is that everyone kind of like has their own like horsey name and like makes their own character or something. Like that seems to be part of it as well. Where they
Yeah,
have like, because I
that
remember,
seems to be true. Yes.
yeah, there was a Bob's Burgers episode where they made fun of this whole phenomenon.
All right.
So I guess, yeah, that must be it too.
Here we go. Fantasy versus bronies. Dave, we began with you. Your vote goes to.
Well, this might be the contrarian take, but this Dr. Psychology really changed my mind about the bronies, so I'm going to be voting for fantasy.
Oh, okay. Sarah, let's go to you.
Yeah, like I think I might have to go fantasy now.
Oh my God. Marlaena?
I was almost gonna vote for Brony, and then I was like, "Oh, am I being too much of a troll?"
I
But
can't believe what's
I'm
about to happen.
I'm voting for fantasy because I
Syd,
don't.
your vote goes to.
I'm still voting for bronies.
I am also still voting for bronies.
I would like to change my vote. I didn't realize that I was starting a trend.
So, Dave, were you just like, you know what? I'm gonna throw fantasy a vote, but you didn't believe it?
I was gonna. I didn't want it to be a sweep for the. I felt bad for the bronies. I didn't want
It
it
wasn't
to
going to be a
sweep.
sweep. There was no chance I was voting for. I mean, look, I'd vote for all of these as I could to merge and be sent to space. But now, Syd, you were the only one not swayed. Can you tell me why?
Oh, I was moved. I was moved. And actually, here's the point that I'll say. Um, um, what does the stereotypical teenage girl feel? It's like angst and like first of all, you're teens. That's crazy for everyone. But girls also have this like extra shit and the carefreeness that is pitched to them to alleviate from that. I can see how that would be appealing even for an adult man.
Ooh,
So
beta.
I did see that, but I'm still voting for bronies because yeah, I would be more embarrassed to be a brony, whereas I unironically bragged about how my rogue leveled up to level 7 yesterday.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I'm changing my vote to Brony.
I was about to say, yeah, like Marlena and Sarah, let's say you're going on a date with a guy. He's like, oh, let's go back
Yeah.
to my place. You're like, yeah, sure. And he's got My Little Pony stuff.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Now, the question is, are we allowed to change our votes?
Why not?
Why not?
That's a great question. Why not? I'm sold. So it went from being 3-2 in favor of fantasy to Syd saying, I'm not changing my vote. Me saying, me neither. Dave panicking, saying, yeah, I'm going fantasy or I'm going bronies. All right. So it went from 3-2 in favor of fantasy to a clean sweep for bronies. Bronies moves on to next week's semifinals where they will take on LARPers. So that's going to be a hell of a matchup. Let's move on to tonight's third quarterfinal matchup. Pro wrestling fans against Disney adults. Syd, I want to start with you. You're a fan of pro wrestling. Last week, I talked about how the worst of the worst wrestling fans fester online. Also at live events when you see them wearing replica titles, is which Dave was exposed to. Syd, let's start with you. Pro wrestling fans.
Well, yeah, I am a pro wrestling fan, even
So
though
am
I
I.
don't watch wrestling. I
Sure.
watch people talk about how bad it is.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to get back into NXT, which from what I hear is probably the best product out there right now on TV.
You're not missing much.
But yeah, exactly. So, I like it. I miss what it was. I grew up on it, and I have a lot of nostalgia on it. And I understand how can I say? I understand how people would think it sucks to look how it is now, you know?
Sure. How do you feel about the fans?
Oh, geez. Uh, they're
Wow.
yeah, they're
This
pretty
guy's in
bad.
pain.
They're pretty bad. But okay, and this ties into something else that you mentioned earlier. I've said this multiple times unironically. I'm not joking, even though I'm not an expert. I think enjoys Twitter should be a criteria in the DSM. And I say this as someone who enjoys Twitter. I know
Yeah.
there's something wrong with me. Whatever it says about me that I enjoy Twitter is bad.
This is wow.
So that being said, yeah, I wrestling fans are the worst, and I enjoy hanging out with them.
All right. I love it. I love it. Sarah, let's go to you. Pro wrestling fans. Any thoughts, any experience, anything at all?
Not really. I mean, I enjoyed watching wrestling as a kid with my dad.
Mhm.
Like, I have good memories associated with it, but I never really been to like matches until I was older, and I
Sure.
didn't really have a lot of interaction with people
Yeah.
there. It seemed like a good time, though I can
Yep.
see people getting maybe a little too heated,
Yeah.
but I don't have enough information
Not
to
enough
really.
reference point. Understood. Marlena, you were here last week when it advanced to the quarterfinals. Thoughts this week?
Yes, the much nerdier option, pro wrestling, of course, than Rand there, surely. Yeah, I think that I'm gonna say it. I feel like you have a little bit more of a biased opinion because you have to deal with the fans more. And
And I will say, I'm just going to jump in. I see more of it.
yeah.
I don't particularly deal with any fans. My experience as a performer is 99% of the time positive. The company that I help organize, you, Marlena and Dave, and Sarah, you've been to shows recently. The audience is not particularly nerdy. They're adults who I think are veer more towards like, whoa, yeah, let's go see some stuff at Fun Electric. Where they get really into it, I think they leave it at the venue. But I've had some very bizarre interactions with fans. But let's keep going, Marlena.
And I don't know. I feel like wrestling has like become cool, and I understand it's like, I what you were describing last week of, people arguing online about wrestling and I don't know anything about wrestling or arguing
Well,
about.
and that's it. I'm sure you see
Yeah.
this. And what I referenced last week was fans of different companies arguing about which show has higher ratings or attendance figures or
Mhm.
how much money the gate pulls in. That to me is when you've lost the plot.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Dave, you might straddle both sides where you enjoy it from time to time. You've been with me to shows where the nerdiest of the nerds fester.
Yeah, I think you get a lot of like maybe
A lot of cargo shorts.
a lot of cargo shorts, a lot of maybe introverted people who take the night to sort of uh, it's like their extrovert moment where they get to yell and scream and everything coming out to a
But
show.
that part's fun.
That
You know
part's
what I
fun.
think?
Yeah, I'm not
It
saying.
reminds me of what Mark talked about on week one, or rather what you mentioned about Mark. There's a lot of gatekeeper nerds
Yeah.
in wrestling.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I'll mention that again. Like that's what bothers me. It's the wrestling nerds who feel like they know more about the kayfabe and the history that's going on than other nerds and like hold it above them. I've noticed that on Twitter a lot, where it's like you don't really know what they're like. You're buying into the story, but I'm the real fan and I know what's going on behind the scenes.
The pendulum is swung where they used to make fun of more pure fans, where a pure fan is a joy to deal with now. The ones who don't care about the quality of the performance.
And
Like I have some coworkers now who are like, "Oh, did you see that match? I loved it." For me, I'm like, "Well, I didn't love it, but I love that you loved it." Versus, I'd probably give that 1 star.
yeah, who's it? Like Dave Meltzer is what's the guy's name?
Wow, Dave, you've been doing your research. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's the foremost wrestling journalist.
Yeah, he seems annoying, and people responding to him seem annoying, and he seems annoying too. But maybe
Yeah,
that's,
he argues with fans
yeah,
too.
yeah, and that's
Yeah,
like,
Dave Meltzer is literally the
The ultimate wrestling nerd.
no, yes, but he basically he's the ultimate capitalizer on first mover advantage. He's literally the guy who started his own MLM company and just never quit, and now he's like at the top of the pyramid because he was first in.
Yeah. For like
And
40,
that's
40
the only
years.
reason anyone
Yeah.
cares about what he has to say. Is because he was the
Interesting.
first one to start publishing himself saying it.
Now, one thing we didn't talk about is there was a famous "It's Still Real to Me" kid,
Oh, hell yeah.
and I feel like he's someone who is nerdy for sure, 100% nerdy. But
Yeah.
there's something that's very pure about his love for wrestling and viewing his heroes, despite the fact that he knows deep down that
He
they're
knows.
just
It's not even
performing.
deep down. He knows it's frontal lobe.
But he
awareness.
wants to keep the fantasy alive for himself, and he's imploring others
The
to
best
do the same.
now for clarity purposes, there was a wrestling conference, or there was a series of old time wrestlers. It was a Q&A, a symposium, if you will. And this kind of classic nerdy Southern wrestling fan was taking the time to thank these performers for the sacrifices they made, the injuries that they endured, and he began crying and interrupted himself by saying, "It's still real to me, damn it."
Yeah.
But to me, you might see that at a Comic-Con who's like, "Your comic books got me through the hard times, damn it." Or someone that would see the original Chewbacca and be like, "Still in the suit, damn it."
Yeah. So that's very nerdy. Like that, I feel like there's that subset of people who are just really into it in a nerdy way, but it's like a sweet
I would say
nerdom.
he's the best of the worst.
It's like a sweet, heartwarming nerdom versus something that feels very gatekeepy. Like he's
someone
welcoming you.
someone who would call him a mark.
Yeah. And if another fan called him a mark, that fan would be the one pissing me off, I think.
All right, let's go into Disney adults. We're probably all going to have more authority here. Sarah, let's start with you. Disney adults, they're so cool. There you go.
No, they're not.
Love it. Sarah, you're joining the bully side tonight, whether you realize it or not.
I mean, I've read and like seen some stuff with like Disney adults, like the ones who are really into it, like the ones who are like mad that there are children at the park.
Whoa.
Because it's
Now,
like
I can understand people like being frustrated by kids taking up space.
Yeah, but
when
at
you're in an
Disney
amusement
World,
park where families save up money to take their children
yeah.
so you can stand in line wearing your Mickey Mouse ears. Oh, yuck. Okay,
Yeah.
continue, Sarah. Yeah.
Stuff like that, like when it's similar to kind of the brony thing, where it's like where you're when you're taking space in something that was meant for children and then making it more serious than it is.
I'll tell you what I really don't like about them is how self-aware they are. And they're like, "Isn't this so dorky that we're doing this?" Like, oh my God. Yeah, that part frustrates me. Marlena, I can tell you loved that. Let's go to you.
Yeah, actually, after last week, I did a little Pinteresting and tried to find some like I did a looky-loo for some real proper
Yeah.
Disney adult, and some of the really dark, horrifying ones were like people who'd have Disney-themed weddings.
Oh, man.
And then what's really nasty is that it's like all of these like I think it's weirdly more horrifying to me when it's like really rich people who are Disney adults and can afford all of like the crazy shit or whatever.
Well,
It's
Dave spoke to this, I believe,
Yeah.
last week, and you talked about how this rich guy you knew had like, what is it, the 33 Club, where you pay $33,000 a year to be like a Disney elite.
Yeah, exactly. And just touching on that, what Sarah was saying is that yes, there were a lot of kids at the park, but we had a tour guide when I went with him, and he would literally bring us to the front of the line, put his hand out, block like a child who just waited an hour and a half to get on a ride, and then usher the rich people into the front of the line.
And I want to add to this. That kid could be sick. That kid could be like, this is their last thing they want to do.
Well,
but
he's
I will
gonna have to
say
wait, James.
At this point, about themed weddings, I have seen video of wrestling themed weddings online that have made me want to put my pen in my butthole and pull so I could be torn away.
I think a themed wedding in any one of the nerd categories is going to be cringe. Like,
Yeah,
there's no way.
it's horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible. Sid,
Yeah.
let's go to you. Disney adults.
I assume we're talking about Disney proper and not Disney plus everything else they've acquired, which is everything.
No, we're just talking about like Mickey Mouse and
Yeah, yeah. I think it's cringe, except if you're doing it because you loved it as a child and like never grew out of that. Like that I can understand. Like Disney adults who have grown like obsessed with Disney their whole lives, that I'll get.
yeah.
But the others, it's like, uh,
Coming in
cringe.
from the chat, the real Andrew Mackay on that note, Sid writes, quote, there's a great article about these rich parents who take their kids to Disney and take themselves to Disney because they never got to do so as a kid. So that's kind of cringe. So it's more about them than the kids, I suppose. This is very interesting. Dave, Disney adults.
Well, yeah, my daughter's super into Disney right now. She dresses up as Elsa. And if she continued to dress up as Elsa into her adulthood, I would be very ashamed of myself as a parent.
I think what bugs me the most about Disney adults is how they're like, oh yeah, we're so normal. Like it's just this like, isn't it dorky that we do this? I think I'd rather the sicko version that you're talking about, Dave,
It's also just
than
like I don't want her to like she wants to be a princess right now. That's like her thing.
yeah.
Uh, I feel like adults who want to be princesses, I don't know. I just like or princes too. No need to go along one
Yeah.
gender, but yeah, if you want to be like, oh, I'd love to be a prince, and you're like 30, like, well, too bad, buddy.
Wait, imagine for a second that we knew someone who was like, yeah, I really want to be a prince.
Yeah, we do. His name is Mark
Yeah.
Roland.
I hope one day my princess will find me. Yeah,
And they will when they see Marlena LARPing.
yeah.
Ah, yes, my towering queen. Let's make the vote here. I think we've made more valid arguments against pro wrestling fans, but Disney adults sicken me more.
Yeah.
So I'm voting for Disney adults. Marlena, let's go to you.
I'm also voting for Disney adults. I think what you're saying is like, yeah, the whole like, oh, it's just so adorable. Like it's funny because you keep saying that they're self-aware, and I think that what they're actually doing is like role playing self-awareness a
That's
little.
interesting. Okay.
And
I like it.
and the fact yeah, like kind of try like just like weirdly kind of like holding on to this thing and like making it your thing. And again, I'll go back to like hot topic, like Disney princess leather purse, not okay. I'm voting for Disney adults.
All right. Sid, let's go to you. Pro wrestling fans, Disney adults.
Um, it's fitting that I follow Marlena because I just want to say I would also be sour at pro wrestling fans beating Renaissance people. That was absolutely senseless. But that being said, it's pro wrestling fans versus Disney adults. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely Disney adults are more cringe for all sorts of reasons. Yeah, this is another one which isn't even close. Yeah.
It's interesting because I feel like it should be, but for some reason it isn't. Dave, let's go to you. The vote's been made. It's 3 in favor, so the Disney adults have it, but let's continue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to follow the herd here, James. I think that like there's something more endearing about a fan that's really into wrestling at a even if it's an older person.
It's still real to me, damn it.
Yeah,
Guy got you.
you're. I don't know what the difference is exactly because you are just following like these make believe heroes. But I guess like
But you know what's interesting about the make-believe heroes is the thing that you love that they did, they actually did it. Unlike an actor who doesn't do their own stunts or anything, the wrestler is the artist.
That's true.
Wrestling is very much like figure skating.
Mm.
You wouldn't say, well, Elvis Stoico is a make-believe hero if you happen to be your hero,
I've
because
been
he
saying
did the
that for
thing.
years.
He did, yeah. Well, I think you've currently got Elvis Stoico's haircut.
Yeah. Oh, do I? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. It's a mix of Elvis Stoico and KD Lang.
Oh, I was gonna say, Brian? What's the Brian?
Betzer?
Yeah, no, not the Brian Setzer Orchestra. Who's the figure skater? Ah, forget it. Who cares? I'm voting
Elvis
for
Stoico.
Yeah, Elvis Stoico. I'm voting for Disney adults.
All right, Sarah, let's go to you. I think I know.
Disney adults.
Disney adults. We're fine. Moving on to our final bracket tonight. You know, this is a good one. It's quarter after, so it shows that we're being very thorough with these quarterfinals. The final matchup tonight, cosplay versus weebs. I think this is going to be a good one. Cosplay versus weebs. Sarah, I want to start with you. Costume play.
I actually find cosplay very interesting. I think there's a lot of artistry. I'm into
This came up last week, I will say, so don't I can sense perhaps a bit of a like, should I?
But I think it's a craft. I think it's sewing, it's design, it's interesting, and it takes skill and it takes dedication, and it's very pretty.
It's a very creative hobby.
Yeah, and I like it a lot. I think it's really interesting. I don't know how I know it can be kind of toxic. Like, I know that there's a lot of like competitiveness on like the circuit.
Yeah.
At conventions and stuff. I've also seen some pretty cringe cosplay. But I don't know. I think
Sarah,
overall,
have you ever costume played?
of course.
Syd, let's go to you. Cosplay.
I have respect for cosplay. I think as someone who's a part of many of the fandoms that some cosplayers cosplay, I really enjoy seeing, a pretty girl playing Samus or Barrett or other video game characters or whatever. And comic book characters and all that shit. Don't get me started on comics. So,
Syd, are you getting horny here?
What?
Marlaena, let's go to you. Cosplay.
Well, I think that maybe I need to start doing that as a career. Maybe I think I've maybe found the thing that I've been searching for, out of like just talking about it a lot. It's really interesting to me. The reason why, again, I'm probably going to end up voting for it over weebs
Interesting.
is because, again, it's like, I think that's another subset that like intersects with each other. I think also some of the cringier, like cosplayers will go into weeb territory and maybe do some really not okay things.
Okay, well, we'll touch on that later on. Dave, let's go to you. Currently cosplaying as Elvis Stoico.
I've mixed. I think I agree with the artistry. I think that there is a anything where you display a skill of yours in doing can be impressive, which sort of removes some of the nerdiness from it.
Sure.
I'm not going to. I feel like there is like an industry of models who get hired to cosplay for fans. And I feel like there's niches.
We're not talking about the models though.
But I'm talking about the people who enjoy the models.
They're hired guns.
But the hired guns, would you consider someone who's into cosplay part of the cosplay nerddom? Like somebody who watches it? Yeah. So I'm thinking about the people who maybe would pay for like a cosplay OnlyFans or something. And that to me is a little bit above and beyond.
Yeah, but that's another thing. You're basically paying for sexy content.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Let's move on to weebs. Marlaena, let's start with you. Weebs. I walked by a store on St. Catherine Street that I was like, oh, this is a weeb store. It was a store that specialized in claw games where you pick up the dolls, but they had all these other kind of like Japanese pop culture things, like standing statues. Like, oh, I'm gonna take a a picture with this statue of a character from Dragon Ball.
Yeah,
Marlena,
with
let's
like the
see.
crazy like balloon tits, like any of those
Whoa,
guys.
calm down. You're gonna get Dave excited. Dave loves CBTs.
Yeah, I've known a lot of weebs in
Jesus Christ.
my time. And yeah, I think, talk about maybe like the least self-aware group to be.
Wow. Marlena, this is the meanest you've been tonight. They make you sick.
Yeah, the worst of the worst, for sure. Yeah.
Wow.
'Cause
Okay.
it's also there is like a weird like appropriative element to it, like we were talking about last week.
Yeah.
That is really
So you're saying appropriation is nerdy.
it
Could have been its own group. Syd, let's go to you, Weebs.
I like multiple animes, multiple mangas. But yes, Marlena is absolutely right. There are a bunch of weirdos in that fandom.
Yeah, I saw a weeb coming at and I came face to face with a Harajuku girl the other day.
I don't know what that is.
How could we? Can someone
have a book
describe it
about
in a
it.
way that I feel like I will not get myself in trouble for?
So like Harajuku fashion became really popular in like the late 90s, early 2000, and it's just like Japanese style of like dressing that's like very eccentric. It's almost like has like the Lolita style where it's like the apron and the little like kind of like maid looking
Yeah,
Ah,
like the stockings
Like,
that stop at the
I
thighs. Like
see.
it's almost like there's
Yes.
something like childish about it.
that's actually I would argue that that's more Lolita dressing rather than Harajuku specific. That was like a whole that's a whole I have a whole book on it.
Well, either way, it was bleeping nerdy. Syd, let's continue with you.
Yeah, so there's a big overlap.
Here it comes. Here it comes.
No, but for real, I mean,
Dave's
there are a
ears are
bunch of
ringing. I think you're
anime-
about to bring up some CBTs.
animes get cosplayed, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I enjoy it too much to go too hard on it, even though I'm very casual about it. But I was kind of, I'm one of those guys when I don't know any of their names, but I've been affected by both of these guys' art. The guy who created Dragon Ball, who died not that long ago, and Goku, a bunch of people. There was one of Goku and Guts both sitting side by side, like all beaten up after a fight with their both of their respective artists over them who are both
Mhm.
dead. And that seeing that on my Twitter feed of all places, that kind of
It
gave me a
rocked ya.
gut punch I wasn't
Okay.
expecting. Yeah,
Akira Toriyama.
thank you. So yeah, I forget where I was going with this, but
Well, you were saying you don't want to go too hard in on him, which means that you could, but you will not.
Well, I it's probably the closest one of the night for me as far as matchups go, because I did have to think about it.
Okay.
And I would likely see myself voting for cosplayers as well. I am persuadable, but
Hmm.
yeah. And I guess I'm biased because I like that shit.
Okay. I love
Yeah.
it. Sarah, let's go to you, Weebs.
As younger, I watched a lot of anime. I read a lot of manga. I was into it. Like I wanted to learn Japanese. I was into it. And I have seen online and in real life some awful shit.
Tell us.
Yeah, it's really
I
good.
went to Anime North in Toronto when I was a teenager, which is like at the time was the biggest anime convention in North America. I'm pretty sure.
It's
And
probably where you met Mark without knowing.
maybe you might have been there.
Yeah, he was talking Klingon to people.
It's
And
the
there's
wrong building.
Yeah.
wrong convention. But there's just like there's a fetishization, like a fetish element, and like an appropriation of culture that's not everyone, but we're talking lowest of the low.
Yeah.
So uncomfortable that it's just like, and like it's just the cringe, and like people who don't speak the language using random Japanese words in everyday speech.
Yeah,
And
or talking like kind of like cute.
yeah, and it makes me uncomfortable.
All right. Dave, let's go to you. I know this is gonna be tough because you like Harajuku girls.
Oh, come on, James. Enough. Anyway, yeah, I'm not a huge anime guy. I did like Dragon Ball Z. I watched all of that. But I like, I don't know if this qualifies me as a weeb, but I like Japanese gambling games like pachinko.
It's a different category.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, you just like gambling.
Yeah, but the Japanese ones have some pretty cool, they have some pretty cool machines.
All right. Well, now we've got Dave's take here. I think this is going to be a fun vote. I'm immediately voting Weebs. Marlena, let's go to you.
I'm voting for cosplayers because
Costume players.
because I want to see them go as far as they can, and I want everyone to stop talking about weeps.
No. Syd, are you sticking with cosplay?
Yes, I'm sticking with cosplayers. I haven't encountered anything to change my vote.
I was already going to vote for Weebs, but Sarah talking about people sprinkling in Japanese words as they're talking, it's really gross. Sarah, your vote goes to
Fleebs for me.
Damn, this is very exciting. Dave, you are the swing vote.
Wow.
It's almost apropos that this is the first time it's happening, and it is on the last matchup of the night, the fourth quarterfinal. 2 for cosplay, being Syd and Marlena. 2 for Weebs, being Sarah and myself. Dave, who do you vote for?
I feel kind of bad being the swing vote here, James, because I really couldn't care less about either of these categories. Ultimately.
Look, none of us care.
Right.
But it's about which is nerdier.
I like Japanese stuff in general.
That's not the argument.
I know. So I can see how one would go down that path.
Syd is dying over here.
The path to
glasses are gone.
To weebdom.
Yeah.
On the other hand, cosplayers,
just keep vamping. I'm loving this.
I don't like when it's too sexual. I don't like that. I don't want to see. But
here's the thing: they're having sex.
Yeah, are they? They might be.
I don't know.
Oh man, this is tough.
Think about it again. Let's go back to another on one hand for weebs.
Well, I was going to. On one hand, weebs, like they inject Japanese words. On the other hand, the Japanese is a beautiful language.
Yeah, what if they're saying it with a fun accent?
Yeah, if they're saying it with respect to its origin, then I feel like.
Sarah, do you feel like it was said with respect?
All right.
Well, that says enough. That noise says it all. Dave, on the other hand,
cosplay. I mean, you're dressing like a weirdo. Why are you putting on a costume at all?
Why not?
Now, coming in from the chat, once again, final comment of the night probably. The real Andrew McKay writes, quote, "You don't choose the weeb life. The weeb life chooses you." Dave, you got to make the pick. We're 3 minutes away from 10:30. I think, to me, it feels clear.
I gotta go with weeb, I guess.
Man.
I gotta go with it.
Why do you tell us, Dave? Immediate reaction.
Because I feel like I was looking at Sarah's face and she was just so upset.
Yeah.
So I decided to dignify that upset face with the correct answer, which is weak.
This is incredible. The quarterfinals are complete. The semifinals for next week have been set. When next week LARPers face off against Bronies in a true matchup of mega powers, followed by, on the flip side, Disney adults taking on weebs. That is next week, weebs versus Disney adults, LARPers, I can't even say it without laughing, versus Bronies. A week from tonight, March Madness nerd subsets will end. We'll have the semifinals and the finals. A champion will be crowned. We're also going to have the best of the rest. We'll have an undercard. We're going to do something. We did it tonight. Final thoughts. Sarah, let's start with you. A great ending. A great ending. I think that you played a huge part in this.
I'm happy to do my part. But it's surprisingly more difficult than I thought it would be. Because I do have affection for just about every one of those. And like could fit in to a certain degree into every single one, except for maybe Bronies. But yeah, that was surprisingly difficult. And also to like separate yourself from it and be like, I enjoy this, but I cannot.
And I think that's the difference. Right? I can enjoy this objectively, but here's the cesspool of what lingers beneath, as Dave put it in. Who said the crevices? Someone said crevices.
That was me, James.
Yeah. And I went with the butt crack. Marlaena, final thoughts tonight.
I'm always happy to be here, James. I'm happy that I'm like, starting to discover perhaps a new passion and subset that I'm to. And even though I did want to go with cosplayers over weebs, taking it all into consideration, I feel like the right decision was been made, and I have to respect that.
But I do like that you stuck to your guns. That's why we're voting. Syd, final thoughts as we wrap up not only week 3 but the 4-year anniversary.
Congrats on 4 years, and to all the nerds out there, you're not alone. And I think may the worst nerds win.
That they will. Dave, final thoughts tonight. You were the swing vote.
I felt like tonight was another example of us riding the line, James. I don't want to be too mean to anybody, for all the nerds out there. It gets better. I would also like to say that I'd like to do a bit of a deeper dive into some of these during this upcoming week so that next week I'm really prepared and understand these fascinating subcultures and don't just feel like I'm mocking them from afar.
Yeah, I think that you are a real champion for the final 4 by calling them fascinating subcultures. In many ways, we could have cleaned it up by calling it the March Madness of fascinating subcultures.
Sure, that would have been more respectful.
Well, I think that subcultures is it's a whole other tournament unto itself.
Could be.
And that might be slated for 2026 because, Marlaena, you recently pitched next year's March Madness as the top 16 kinks, I believe.
Oh, yeah. Could bring a new fan base, although maybe you want to do it as an OnlyFans.
Put it on the list of things to do, Dave.
I predict the winner will be butt stuff.
Well, on that note, that's our show for tonight. This has been week 3 of the Nerd Subset March Madness. For Marlaena, Dave, Sarah, and Syd, I am James. You are you. We were here. Good night, goodbye, farewell, and of course, be well.
I'll let Marlaena play us out for a minute. Go ahead, anytime now.
You got it.
I'm getting shy now.
Okay.